The department store, a place many of us associate with pleasant shopping trips, was originally designed to make you desire things you didn't even know existed 5 minutes before stepping inside. This opulent display of capitalism, born over a century ago, wasn't just selling goods, it was selling an entire experience, constructed on a foundation of meticulously crafted illusion and often immense personal sacrifice. Lily, what was the true nature of these early retail palaces?
You're touching on a fundamental paradox, James. The text describes these massive structures, like the one we're imagining stepping into in 1907, as appearing like mountains, too vast to have been built by human hands. Yet they were precisely that, human creations designed with an almost unsettling intentionality. From the marble and music to the perfume that seems to drift from nowhere, every detail was orchestrated. It wasn't about simply facilitating a purchase. It was about enveloping you in an atmosphere of abundance and aspiration. They even had their own electrical plants, telegraph offices, and rooftop gardens. This wasn't just a shop. It was an entire ecosystem of desire.
And it makes me wonder about the contrast between that grand facade and the lived reality for the people who actually made it run. The source describes a new employee waking in a rented room above a bakery with wallpaper peeling and putting on her one good dress with immense care. She doesn't use the grand brass doors. She finds a service entrance. This immediate juxtaposition between the perceived luxury and the stark reality of those who served it is quite striking. It sets a stage not just for shopping, but for a very specific kind of social drama.
Absolutely. That opening image is crucial. It immediately grounds us in the perspective of the individual whose labor fuels this grand illusion. When this new clerk steps onto the selling floor 40 minutes before the public arrives, the text states, quote, "You understand for the first time what the building is actually for. It isn't a shop. It's a stage set for a play called Abundance, and you have just been hired as a piece of the scenery." End quote. This isn't just about selling, it's about performing a role. Every employee becomes an actor in this theatrical presentation of wealth, even if their own pockets are empty. The service entrance is a literal and symbolic demarcation. There's a front-of-house experience and a back-of-house reality, and they are worlds apart.
So the building itself, with its sheer scale and amenities, like the hospital room for fainting customers, which the text wryly notes is never offered to fainting clerks, is a carefully constructed psychological environment. It's not just a place to buy things, it's a place to feel a certain way, to aspire to a particular lifestyle. And the architecture supports this by being overwhelming, almost otherworldly, as if to say this level of luxury is beyond the mundane. But then we learn about the man whose initials are everywhere, the one who perfected this trick. He didn't invent the department store, but he certainly refined its method of operation. How did his vision reshape the very act of shopping?
His genius, if you can call it that, lay in recognizing that shopping could be transformed from a transactional necessity into an experience. Before these grand stores, buying something often involved haggling over prices in smaller, less inviting shops, leaving customers feeling, quote, faintly accused of something, end quote. This owner introduced fixed printed prices, which at the time was revolutionary. It created a sense of transparency and fairness, even if the fairness was superficial. More importantly, he envisioned a place where anyone, a duchess, a laundress, a child, could walk through the same doors and for the duration of their spending be treated like royalty. This was the core of the illusion, democratizing the feeling of luxury, even if the means to acquire it remained stratified.
It's a clever psychological move. By treating everyone like royalty while they're spending money, he taps into a universal desire for status and respect, making the act of consumption inherently pleasurable. But the text also points out the stark reality of this system. It made one family enormously rich while paying the people who ran the machine just enough to keep running it. This feels like a very early, very clear example of an exploitative economic model hiding behind a facade of nobility or service.
Precisely. The owner's genuine, sincere belief that he is doing something noble is presented with a subtle, chilling irony. His nobility was rooted in the idea of providing access to goods and a refined shopping experience, but it completely overlooked the human cost of creating that experience. The text describes him as seeing his employees not with cruelty, but as something closer to weather, an unavoidable cost of doing business, like coal. This dehumanization is key. If you view your workforce as an interchangeable commodity, then their personal well-being or the adequacy of their wages becomes secondary to the efficiency and profitability of the grand play called abundance being staged.
That analogy of weather is particularly insightful. It suggests a force of nature, something to be managed or factored into costs, rather than a group of individuals with lives and needs. And then we get to the actual arithmetic of these wages. The text paints a picture of a small stack of coins that, for a hopeful second, looks like more money than it is. Rent takes the largest bite, then bread, then the car fare. What's left is meant to cover clothing, illness, and the occasional luxury of joy, but, quote, it does not stretch that far, end quote. It paints a very bleak picture of basic survival.
It's not just basic survival, James. It's a meticulously calculated deprivation. The text goes on to detail the system of fines: a quarter-cent for a wrinkled collar, a nickel for resting a hip, a whole day's pay for a till shortage that wasn't even the clerk's fault. These aren't framed as punishments, but as standards, a form of quality control. It's a secondary, perfectly legal kind of theft, as the text describes it. The store extracts labor, then it extracts portions of the meager wages, all under the guise of maintaining its polished image. The irony is, these standards were almost impossible to meet, given the working conditions and the pressure.
And then there's the insidious encouragement to buy working clothes from the store itself, at the store's prices. So the wage leaves the hand and walks straight back through the front door, up to the very counter where the clerk is meant to look effortlessly well-dressed. This effectively creates a closed loop where the store reclaims part of what it pays, while simultaneously ensuring its employees contribute to the desired aesthetic. It's a brilliant, if morally dubious, economic strategy. This system seems designed to perpetuate a cycle of indebtedness, or at least financial precarity.
It's a perfect example of control, both economic and psychological. The store ensures you're dependent on it, not just for your wages, but also for your very presentation, which is critical to your employment. And the ultimate threat, delivered instantly and without malice, is chilling. There are 40 girls on the waiting list who'd take your position by morning. This statement eliminates any room for complaint, any leverage for the employee. It reinforces their replaceability, their fungibility, which further drives down any sense of worth or value beyond their immediate function within the system. It's a quiet form of terror, knowing your entire livelihood can be extinguished at a moment's notice simply because you dared to voice a grievance.
That's a powerful point. It's not just about the money, it's about the pervasive atmosphere of fear and control, which brings us to this idea of the uniform of poverty performing wealth. Clerks must look impeccable, spotless, with perfectly arranged hair, all to avoid reminding wealthy customers of poverty. The logic, from the store's perspective, is brutally clear. A shabby clerk reminds a customer of what they want to avoid, while a gleaming one reminds them of the life they could have if they simply bought that hat. This puts an immense burden on the employees, forcing them to spend money and effort they don't have to maintain an illusion.
It's a performative elegance that is anything but optional. The text describes it as, quote, the entrance fee for a job that doesn't pay enough to afford the fee, end quote. So clerks become experts in the art of illusion themselves, pressing only the front-facing hem of a dress, angling their body to hide a worn patch, keeping their chapped, pin-nicked hands constantly moving to prevent inspection. The visible signs of their labor and their poverty must be meticulously concealed. This isn't just about looking good. It's about actively erasing any visual evidence that might disrupt the customer's fantasy of effortless wealth and the abundance they are meant to feel surrounded by. It's an exhausting, continuous act of deception.
And the cost of this performance extends beyond the financial. Imagine the psychological toll of constantly presenting a facade that contradicts your lived reality, day in and day out for 11 hours. It sounds like a deeply alienating experience. This leads us to the physical demands, the forced standing. The chairs are for customers, never for clerks. Sitting is treated as a moral failing, not a physical need. How did these conditions manifest in the clerks' bodies and their coping mechanisms?
The physical toll was immense and chronic. The text details the progression, from small, polite objections from the feet in the third hour to a formal grievance by the sixth, with the lower back joining in. Clerks developed subtle, almost unconscious coping mechanisms. The discrete rocking motion, shifting weight from heel to heel, was one that even the floor manager couldn't quite find them for. They learned the secret geography of relief, leaning against a counter edge, volunteering for stockroom visits just to lean against a shelf in the dark for 30 precious seconds. These moments of stolen relief highlight the extreme conditions and the desperate need for even momentary respite.
The description of fainting is particularly stark. It's not a dramatic event, but a logistical problem, handled with a quiet protocol. Two clerks catch a third, still swaying, and walk her to the stockroom before the manager notices. There's no unkindness in it, just logistics. An empty counter is a problem, but a collapsed girl is an empty counter with extra paperwork. This dehumanization, this reduction of a human being to a logistical inconvenience is chilling. It reinforces that the individual's well-being is entirely secondary to the smooth operation of the store.
It truly lays bare the priorities of the institution. The human body, in this context, is simply a vessel for labor, and its failure is an inefficiency to be managed discreetly. This continuous surveillance and pressure leads us directly to the figure of the floor manager. The text describes him as moving like weather, unhurried, everyone else arranging their day around his schedule. He rarely raises his voice, maintaining an air of elegance, but his quiet observations are relentless. A slipped smile, a rested hip, 2 words exchanged that count as idle chatter, and therefore as theft of the store's time. He is the omnipresent enforcer of this demanding, unspoken code.
So he's not just managing the floor, he's managing the performance of the clerks, ensuring they maintain the illusion for the customers, and his behavior towards customers contrasts sharply with his treatment of employees. To customers, he's warm as candlelight, materializing the instant a well-dressed woman looks unattended. If she complains about a clerk, he immediately sides with her. This illustrates a clear hierarchy. Customers represent money, clerks represent cost. He's never confused about that difference.
And the text adds a crucial detail. He is not free either. Above him is a manager, and above that manager, an owner, and above the owner, a ledger that answers to no one. The anxiety, quote, runs downhill and pools at the bottom of the building, which is where you're standing, end quote. This highlights that the system of control and pressure isn't just about individual malice, it's systemic. The manager is also performing a role within a larger structure of profit. He's incentivized to enforce these rules because his own position depends on the store's profitability and the maintenance of its image. It's a chain of command where the pressure of economic imperatives is consistently pushed down onto the most vulnerable.
That's a very important nuance. It's not just a bad boss, it's a system designed to exert control at every level. And this control extends even further with the introduction of the store detective, a genuinely new kind of person invented for this exact building. The very design of the store, with goods within arm's reach, was a thief's dream, requiring this new form of surveillance. The detectives blended in, looking like ordinary shoppers, but their eyes did quiet, relentless work.
Yes, and it's not just customers they're watching. The clerks are under constant scrutiny, too. The text describes clerks developing almost paranoid habits, counting change aloud with theatrical clarity, keeping hands visible, pockets famously, defiantly empty. Imagine the psychological burden of being under constant suspicion, even when performing your duties diligently. A missing button could lead to an afternoon of humiliating questions. This surveillance further erodes any sense of autonomy or trust within the workplace.
And the most revealing and, frankly, disturbing aspect of the store detective's role comes with the differing treatment of theft. A poor woman caught slipping a ribbon into her sleeve is a thief, treated publicly, permanently, without mercy. But a wealthy woman doing the exact same thing might be, quote, quietly diagnosed by a sympathetic physician with a fashionable new nervous affliction, her stolen goods returned without a word, her carriage waiting at the curb, end quote. The same hands, the same ribbon, entirely different endings, calibrated to the thickness of a purse. This is where the store's stated values utterly collapse under the weight of class distinction.
This is the core injustice, the hypocrisy laid bare. The system is not about justice, it's about maintaining appearances and protecting the interests of the wealthy. The very concept of theft is elastic, depending entirely on who is doing the taking. It exposes the brutal classism inherent in these institutions, where the rules are not universal but are applied selectively based on economic power. And the clerk, witnessing this, learns the single most important skill this job demands: witnessing an injustice in complete, pleasant silence while folding ribbon. That silence, that forced composure in the face of blatant unfairness, is another layer of the emotional cost of working in such an environment.
That silence, the forced pleasantness, leads us to the ubiquitous phrase, "the customer is always right." On the surface, it sounds like kindness, a commitment to service. But in practice, as the text reveals, it means the customer is allowed to be loud, wrong, and unpleasant, and the clerk is required to absorb it all with a serene smile and the word "certainly." This customer service smile costs something every time it's worn, becoming an unconscious reflex carried into every difficult conversation for the rest of their lives. It's a mask, a form of emotional labor that extracts a hidden price.
It's an emotional tax, James. The smile is a tool, a necessary performance that legitimizes customer aggression and absolves the customer of any need for civility. The building itself was designed to make that smile profitable. Think about the layout. Essentials like thread and plain stockings are relegated to the very back, forcing shoppers to navigate 100 small temptations first. There are no clocks on the selling floor, and windows are dressed or shuttered to obscure the time and weather. The entire environment is crafted to disorient the shopper, to keep them in a timeless, endless afternoon of pleasant drifting, oblivious to their appointments or the approaching dark. And the clerks are crucial to this disorientation.
The clerk becomes part of that machinery, the warmest part of it, as the text says. A friendly clerk who remembers a name and admires a customer's taste is worth more than any window display because trust, quote, loosens a purse faster than anything printed on a price tag ever could, end quote. So the emotional labor of the clerk is not just about making a sale, but about cultivating a deeper, almost intimate relationship that encourages more spending. It's a calculated manipulation of human connection for commercial gain.
Absolutely. It transforms genuine human interaction into a transactional asset. But speaking of windows, the grand street-facing displays represent another facet of this illusion. These are where the store does its dreaming out loud. An artist builds tiny, perfect worlds behind spotless glass. A frozen dinner party, a fireside scene, a Christmas morning so perfect it never actually happened to anyone. These windows are designed to make crowds gather, breath fogging the glass, wanting something they can't quite name. It's not selling a coat, it's selling the feeling of the life you'd have while wearing it. And feelings, the text states, are the most profitable thing in the whole building.
And the irony is that the clerk, with her chapped and pin-nicked hands, helps dress these windows, handling a life she will never live before stepping back inside to sell buttons. Then, on her walk home, she becomes part of the crowd, gazing at the window, and for one unfair second, genuinely perfect. The spell catches her too. She knows precisely how well it works because she feels it herself. This underscores the pervasive power of these illusions, even for those who meticulously construct them.
It's a testament to the effectiveness of the marketing, even on its own creators. The clerk is caught in the same aspirational trap, wanting the very dream she helps fabricate. This system of control and efficiency extends even to the way money is handled within the store, through the pneumatic cash tubes. The hiss and thunk, heard in sleep for years, is a genuine marvel of engineering. Cash and sales slips are sealed into brass canisters, fired through tubes to a hidden room where a cashier checks arithmetic and change whistles back down. But the reason for this marvel is stark. The owner doesn't trust a single one of the clerks with a full drawer of money.
And before these tubes, the same job was done by children, cash boys and cash girls, barely tall enough to see over the counter, sprinting all day. The tubes were an upgrade, replacing exhausted children with compressed air. This tells us almost everything we need to know about how this building measures the value of a person against the value of efficiency. It's a cold calculus, replacing human labor with technology, not for the benefit of the human, but for the benefit of the bottom line and the owner's mistrust.
It's a brutal assessment of human capital. The text allows for one small pleasure in this cold system. On a slow afternoon, loading the canister and watching it vanish upward like a letter to the heavens, calling it the closest thing to magic in your whole day. But that magic quickly curdles as you remember why it exists. The fleeting moments of wonder are always overshadowed by the oppressive reality of its purpose, surveillance, control, and the deep-seated mistrust of the workforce.
So, after almost 12 hours of standing, the permanent, wordless ache in the feet, many of these girls didn't even go home. They lived in dormitories upstairs, owned by the store. The store became their employer, landlord, cook, and moral supervisor, all at once. Losing a position meant losing their bed and dinner. This level of control extended beyond working hours, creating a total institution where the employees' lives were entirely dictated by the store.
It was pitched to worried families as protection, but in reality, it deepened the store's hold on their lives. It made them utterly dependent, leaving them with very little autonomy or opportunity to leave. However, the text offers a crucial glimmer of hope in its conclusion, reminding us that this oppressive system was not permanent. It points to a future where, quote, "the girls in this building will not stay quiet forever," end quote. It connects these experiences to future acts of resistance, specifically mentioning women refusing to move on selling floors and young people sitting calmly at lunch counters to demand change.
This final thought is incredibly powerful. It reclaims agency for the workers, suggesting that the palace was never really built by the man whose initials are worked into the ironwork. It was built, floor by floor, by the people who stood on it, and eventually it was changed by them too. This transforms the narrative from one of passive victimhood to one of eventual collective action and fundamental societal transformation. It recognizes that even in the most controlled environments, the human spirit for justice ultimately prevails, leveraging the very spaces of oppression for their own liberation.
It reframes the entire story, James. The architectural marvels, the economic systems, the illusions of abundance, they were all products of human labor. And it's that same labor, that same human will, that ultimately pushed back against the injustices. The act of sitting, which was once a moral failing for a clerk, became the very act that stopped the enormous machine cold. It's a profound statement about how change happens, not from the top down, but from the bottom up, driven by those whose daily lives are most impacted by the existing structures. It's a reminder that even in the quietest, most exploited corners, the seeds of future resistance are always being sown.
A truly powerful and transformative message. The story of these gilded counters and the people who worked within them is a testament to both the ingenuity of capitalism and the enduring spirit of those who challenged its inequalities. If you found this discussion thought-provoking, consider sharing it with someone.